Okay, now we're live.
Hello everyone, welcome to EIPIP Meeting 16. Agenda is in the description box. The first item on the agenda is network upgrade repository and process. I guess James was working on it. James, do you have any update on that?
There's a project board now. There's a README that describes it in generally the principle, and then there's a project board with the current state of EIPs going through the network upgrade process, which up to this point is CFI, which we're proposing to change the name of Efi to Cfi, which is going from eligible for inclusion to considered for inclusion. And then the next step after that is inclusion on a client integration testnet like YOLO v1 or YOLO v2. And that's the process up to this point.
Great. In previous meetings, we also were discussing about the process, like how we are going to, move. So this project board that we can see there is actually what we are coming up to.
What do you mean by the question?
2 or 3 meetings back, there were a few proposals on how this repository is going to be managed, or would be the process for network upgrade, because I guess we decided sometimes back that it has to be, proposed in a form of a proposal and added to EIP1 by adding this proposal separately. So I was just wondering if we have anything decided on the process part. Do we want to discuss it now, or it's just good that we go ahead with it?
Yeah, can we discuss it now? Also an update, I said the statuses on the Oracle devs call. There wasn't much feedback. There also wasn't any opposition to the new statuses. James, you weren't here, but we discussed a possible set of phases for the hard fork coordination process. Okay. I linked it in the chat. I could share it also if you guys want that. Like I could share my screen.
Do we do a video recording of this when we post it?
Yes.
Then yeah, sharing your screen would be great.
Just to give you a little background here, so a few meetings back, there was few proposals. One was presented by Eips and one was with me, and we come up with some kind of solution, like we can come up with a combination of these things. In absence of you, we could not come up to a particular decision. So that's what we are hoping to achieve today.
Okay.
So here are the different options that I came up with. And the final one we came up with was like a combination of these. So this is number 5.
Okay.
So we have them each in stages. Stage 1 is eligible. Stage 2 is implementation. Stage 3 is testing. Stage 4 is stage. So this is stage is the decision to go to mainnet, and then the date is decided on, or the block is decided on. And then stage 5 is deployed. The EIP is live, so the date has elapsed and the EIP is live. Stage 6 is maintenance, review, monitoring the EIP after it's launched in mainnet. And 7 is just rejected, which can happen after any of these stages.
Okay.
Yeah, and do you want me to go over the other ones, or?
What's the difference between 5 and 6?
Yeah, that's a good question. So originally one of them had maintenance. I think 6 might be redundant because once it's deployed, then would we say it's deployed or would we say it's in maintenance?
I'm okay with either of those. It just feels like each of these stages is has a clear milestone that is achieved, and once you cross it, you're in the next stage. except for those two, which both seem to occur at the same time.
Yeah. I think like the difference here was before they were just deployed, and then we never really saw maintenance before. That makes sense. Like we never made that our priority. Where once it's deployed, do we keep monitoring it or not?
When you say monitoring it, I'm trying to get a sense of like if I have an EIP go in, then because they are monitoring mainnet and the chain. I don't know if anyone is monitoring the EIP or an individual EIP, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't think the maintenance makes a lot of sense. I think it would just cause more confusion.
And there's a little bit of difference. I think the teams that are when you're maintaining mainnet, you're not thinking about I'm maintaining an EIP. You're just keeping mainnet alive.
Yeah, I was more thinking of like maybe a performance, like to like measure EAPs once they're deployed, see how they're performing.
That would be cool to have a review for, or a post-mortem, but not that word, the other word, retrospective. Like have a retrospective on EIPs and see if they do what they said they would do. That would be interesting.
Isn't that just part of the EIP? Like, if it's not doing what it says it's doing, isn't that just shouldn't that be addressed in every stage?
Yeah, it would be nice to have kind of this. Let's see. So having some more explicitly, let's go back and look at a decision and evaluate it is kind of an interesting thing. For me personally, when I've been putting the hard fork coordination and work together and such, I've worked really hard to not be prescriptive about what things will look like later, or what things could look like. And the reasoning for that is that hard fork coordination is really not like most other software upgrade processes. And the combination of working with multiple clients for Ethereum, even within blockchain, Ethereum has kind of its own way that it develops because of the multiple client implementations, and then the breadth of node operators and community members. So although I can certainly sit down and think of ways I think it will go and maybe have a good prediction or not, I've hesitated on saying this is what it will be like, and rather just went with the emergent properties of what is happening as it's happening. So for an example is, and these stages generally describe what is going to happen, what does happen or what is going to happen. But I don't know if it's necessary to really have it all written out in such a way yet, because like for stage one, it's the having an open discussion about if it's going to be available or not. And 9 months ago, before EFI was thought of, I wouldn't have told you that was the best way for us to track that step. But it turns out to work really well, and it emerged from part of the core dev calls. There was a little bit of confusion about stuff, and so then now we have EFI that came from some other proposals, and that stuck as something that's working really well. And then for stage 2 implementation, I guess the next step is for clients to implement it, but we were having trouble getting clients to merge PRs with the EIPs themselves. And there was about 2 or 3 months where we were in this weird lull where we had EIPs that were considered for inclusion, EFI at the time, but we weren't getting them merged into clients in a way that allowed us to do testing between multiple clients. So in that time while that was happening, Martin and some others thought, hey, this, you know, what would be really great is if we had a testnet that was different than any other testnet we've ever done. And we make sure that it's a testnet that no one else is going to deploy on. And all it does is sync clients so that clients have something to work towards and something to merge into their clients and have everybody agree on what to sync. This is also around the time where we looked at the instead of having make a fork, figure out what goes in it, we did the version where as EIPs are ready, then they're scheduled to go into a fork, like the train model or otherwise that has been said. So because when we changed to that model, there was the moment of, without a deadline, it's hard to get people to do stuff, or without a solid target. So then we went back and evaluated and then came up with the next stage, which is getting your EIP into a client integration testnet like YOLO. So I'm sure that, so stage 3 testing, of course, we need to have testing and fuzz testing, but what does it look like to have finished that stage? Or what does it look like, the thing that we need to do to make sure that stage is being done hasn't really been established yet. And I don't know what it will be, but it will be something. And then stage 4 staged is when something goes on to a testnet, like a more client used or used testnet, like Robston or whatever, all of those things. That's it. That's really part of the staging process. But what's the decision and timeline and stuff around that, I think, is yet to really be established. And I'd rather see what happens with the core devs and then adapt to what is needed on that. And then stage 5 is the hard fork is up and it's live. So I think this does a great job of highlighting the general path of what's going to happen. But I wouldn't like to specify how we get from each of those stages and what it needs to be to go from each of those stages until we are going through them and observe and figure out which is the best way to work as things emerge.
That makes sense.
So I can also see a table here, like the project board. Is it reasonable to consider that maybe the stages? I'm talking about the project board that is available on the Ethereum 1.0 spec. It says that CFI applied, approved, testnet applied. Is it something that can be considered as stages for network upgrade, and that's what we can go ahead with?
Yeah, because that is stage 1A and stage 1B. And then stage 2A and stage 2B in this list that Edson has here. And the reason why I had both is because we have discussions, like people propose that it goes from one stage to another, and then it's in that stage, and then people propose that it goes from one stage to the next, and it made sense to track them as being proposed and accepted into each of those buckets. So that is what is happening there.
Right. So from the point of view of documentation, do we really need to document it? I mean, like in one of the previous meetings, there was this document shared by me. I mean, I shared it, in which we tried to document as similar to the EIP 1, but since we are making a new upgrade process for network upgrade, it was just for the other one. The new one. Thank you, Edson. So here we have actually tried to document the process or how we are doing it in a form of a proposal that can be added as a pull request to the new repository and can be saved as a reference point. Is it something that we still need, or we are good with?
I added this to the this is the README now of the website of the network spec.
Oh yeah, I remember sharing it with you. Sorry, I missed reading the README itself.
Maybe just let's go to the specification, the ETH1 specification website, the GitHub repository. Can you do that, Edson?
Yeah, do you know what it's called?
Yeah, I'm gonna share the link here on the chat.
Where is it?
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. So in this way, like the README already explains whatever we want to do with this particular repository. I mean, it looks good to me, but if there is anything else that we would like to add as we discussed today, the stages.
Yeah. So this I pulled from that document. I left out the diagram of the actual stages because I'd like to do that as we go, document them.
Right.
And the network upgrade process is good for tracking it. And then as we move along, we can clarify and write what the steps are more specifically.
Right.
Yeah. So if
And
there's things to be included on this or thoughts for stuff that needs to be included, so like some ideas is what is the specification of mainnet? Do we put that on there? Having the specification for YOLO, putting this, do we put that on here? Or any other ideas that you guys have, feel free to propose and we should discuss.
right. And in the issues section, I see that there is an issue already created for discussion on EFI to CFI. Do we have right set of people where we can discuss about it?
Yes.
Personally, I am in favor of changing this EFI to CFI, but if people have other thoughts, feel free to share.
I'm cool with it too. It's not a huge deal to me either way.
I mean, I was thinking like eligible sounds more like, okay, fine, you are eligible, you are getting into it. But CFI sounds more reasonable, like consider, I mean, I found that more reasonable. So
Yeah, and it felt like a good time to make a transition of name while we're migrating to ETH 1.0 specs, to just take and make sure that everything, all the terminology is like buttoned down and more specific.
in the chat, Micah mentioned that he also supports going from EFI to CFI. And further, he mentions that I also like the stages after stage 5 and 6 was combined.
Yeah. So I'd say that we take Edson's list with the stages and we can put them into the README and then leave off specifying exactly what or how that each stage transition is defined, and then we'll go back and update them as they're happening.
So you're suggesting we just start implementing the stages and then define how to move them once after we go through them once?
To write that as that is the rough path that is going to happen, but not say exactly how, like implementation is the number 2 is the rough path, is the path that an EIP will go through. It has to go through implementation.
I mean, sorry, I guess there's a stage called implementation. So we use these stages, right? Like officially, but we don't, we go through them to see how it works going through each of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know if I would say we use them as efficiently, but more of as a guiding post for stuff that will probably happen.
Okay.
Like the consider for like implementation, the YOLO stuff is the stuff that you track and have for the stages for implementation, like the sub stages. I don't know. I guess it might be confusing to. I'm torn between the giving people an idea of what's going to happen, and me or just what's the word? like manufacturing a process that it doesn't naturally fit when there's stuff that will, and we just don't know what it is yet.
I see what you were saying. So like in terms of like moving one status to the next, I did write something. One of them was just we just keep doing what we're doing now, like what we're doing naturally, and then just define it later.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're moving towards?
Yeah, we don't have, and we define it later. And like for example, the considered for inclusion is pretty close to ready to defining and having been gone through enough times to say this is what it's like. So as we get things further in the process, we'll get more and more settled about this is the right way to do X, and this is how we track Y. I just want us to get to that point and then figure it out.
Okay. Also, I guess like since we have enough, we could update EAP1.
I would say we update EIP1 to just point to the spec repo at this point and not have any specification of the network upgrade be inside of it yet.
I feel like that pointer is the wrong direction. I think network specifications point to EIPs, not the other way around. Like to me, the EIP is a primitive that can be referenced by other things. It is not a high-level construct. Like they're, in my opinion, the EIPs are technical specifications only. They have no politics. There's no opinions. It's just this is a technical spec for a thing that someone thought was a good idea. And then the ETH network upgrade process could then point to those and say, hey, this is the technical spec that we'll be implementing on this date or whatever. But having EIPs point to the inclusion process, which is much more political, feels to me like the wrong direction for that pointer.
I feel like it's just metadata. So I don't think we have to have any of the upgrade discussion in the EIP, but if I'm looking at an EIP, it's valuable for me to quickly be able to go to where it's being discussed in terms of governance.
I can see your point on EIPs pointing to the network upgrade process, like individual EIPs, except for maybe the exception of EIP1 saying that we have an upgrade process and that to look at it, you should go elsewhere.
Sure. I guess for me, that's more appropriate for the README than the EIP1. Like to me, EIP1 defines this is how you write a spec, whereas the README is more like this is how Ethereum works and how we use this repo. But I wouldn't push back hard against adding to EIP1 if it was just like a mention.
I'd be fine with either of those. It's I want to be able to, if someone's at the EIP repo and thinks, how do I find the upgrade process? I want them to be able to find the right repository. So if that's the README or if that's EIP1 or whatever, that's less important.
I think the thing like Lion's bringing up and the point of disagreement between us on that is the EIP's repo specifically for Ethereum mainnet, or does it also include Ethereum Classic and RSK and all these other things that reference the EIP's repo? I don't know if that's actually on our agenda, though we have been off and on talking about it for a while.
I feel like the Eips repo is just for Ethereum. I think all these other chains have their own governance processes or specifications repo.
Even though Ethereum Classic uses EIPs, they also have the ECIP and their own repo for tracking it. So I agree that it should be specifications and tracking them. I do see value in at least having a tag that says this is an EIP that's on mainnet.
I see Micah's point though that if a specification is a specification, it can be used by other protocols. So it can be protocol agnostic if it's well defined. Like ERC, several other chains have their version of ERC now because it was just defined well and used enough in Ethereum.
Sure, but I think that those other chains can spend their time and track what they have launched on their network, and we can focus on our network.
Yeah, we had talked about it earlier as even just having on the EIP website, like eips.ethereum.org, have a tag that shows up on EIPs that are implemented in Mainnet. But what is implemented in Mainnet is tracked in the network 1.0 specs, not in some meta EIP or as like explicitly even needs to be a field, but some way of doing that.
I mean, all I would like is an additional field in the front matter that says, I don't know, yeah, I don't even know what the name of it would be. Mainnet status, and maybe something like that, and then you can plug in whatever its stage is for the upgrade process, and then link to that repo is.
I would like
to go ahead.
Just one point I would like to mention here that came up yesterday during a conversation with Greg on the EIP repo. Like since we are trying to separate this network upgrade and other proposals there, so he was just mentioning it like it was a casual conversation where we were thinking about like should it be called as EIPs, because we're taking out all the core EIPs and taking it to network repository. Mostly the leftover would be ERC. I know this is not there in the agenda and may require a bigger discussion, but just wanted to bring this point.
I can respond quickly that it sounds to me that Greg is thinking that EIPs are going to be moving over to the network spec repository, but that's not, there won't be any EIPs in the network spec repository. There'll just be lists of things that are going into mainnet, but they will be still in the EIP repository.
Right.
So there isn't anything of that type that's moving over. Well, I just had a thought. I lost it, but it'll come back to me.
I'm sorry, I think I was saying something.
My fear with adding anything about the network upgrade process to EIPs is it will encourage people to come over to the EIPs repository and debate politics on whether we should include something or not. And I really would love to see that all go away. And by go away, I mean become someone else's problem, which means become whoever manages this other repositories. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really big problem with EIPs is we're trying to define a technical spec and we end up with just like a bunch of people talking about whether this is a good idea or not. And I would love to make it so we can just tell them, hey, this is where we're discussing the technical specification, which may or may not go into Ethereum, may or may not go into any other network. This is just a technical spec. If you want to discuss whether it should go into Ethereum, here's where you can go, and it allows us to segregate so we can focus on the technical spec stuff here, and we can focus on the politics somewhere else.
Yeah, and I've seen similar interesting things about where we're talking about a specification, but then we're really talking about what it would need to be able to launch on the mainnet, but that's not something that needed to be talked about at that stage or focused on. So
right.
It makes it difficult. I remembered what I was going to say, that I do think we're at the stage where we're ready to start the new processes for the EIP statuses and migrate the EIP repo to the new ones.
Great.
I had been hesitant before because I wanted to be able to, and I had good feedback from this group that we should have a place where we can point people to the network upgrade process before we start making changes like removing accepted as a status. So now that we have something and we can point people there, I think it's time for us to, or I'd propose that we start implementing the new EIP statuses.
You're referring to like there's a document floating around somewhere that has them like withdrawn and stuff.
Yeah.
I see.
The request for comments and changing active to living and those like that diagram.
Yeah. Okay.
There is a pull request I'm sharing in the chat. I think that is looking for some more discussion on the status, EIP statuses abandoned versus withdrawn. Just wanted to bring it to attention of this group. So that may be considered when we actually start implementing the EIP statuses. Okay, so any more thought on this particular topic? We are almost 30 minutes past, so.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the repository. It looks like people are already using it to have their EIP considered for inclusion, which is good. That the discussion is being moved here. And I guess like we could make as many issues as we want so we can actually have discussion here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And feel free to make issues for like things you want to see in the repository or stuff you think we should be considering. We have a lot more space to make issues of any kind we want because we're not inflating EIP numbers or interfering with that process.
Right, that was my biggest worry.
Yeah, we're almost out.
So moving on to the next item, it is relative versus absolute path. There is a link in the agenda, and that leads to some comments by Micah. So Micah, would you like to take it over?
Sure. I think just to start out, is anybody opposed to relative paths? Everybody I've talked to so far seems pro relative paths, and I think it's just a matter of we need to do it. But I want to first see if there's anyone opposed. This is just, we want to standardize how links are handled. And the question is, do we do /EIP-1.md or do we do https://eips.ethereum.org/EIP/EIP-1? Is anyone opposed to relative? If not, we can just skip this whole topic and just do it. If someone is, we can have a more fruitful discussion.
I would say just do it.
Yeah, I mean, adding that would.
And it's that's something that falls to the purview of EIP editors more so than other topics that we bring up. So just do it.
We can always undo it if we get significant negative feedback as well.
Yep.
Okay, we can just. I'll get a PR out in a couple days, next couple days, until someone beats me to it, and we can skip that.
Sweet.
Cool. So moving on, the next item is working group, but I'm going to skip because I see there is a comment by Litecoin in the agenda itself. I'm going to read that comment. It says that I have no update on working group at this time, although I would like eventually have this structure. I think the breakout session this week was really effective and for the time being a reasonable solution. Anybody has any more comment on it? Otherwise we can move on.
Yeah, the breakout room was great. We made a lot of progress on the EIP and we should do it more often.
Right, for people who could not attend, there is next breakout meeting on September 14th at 1400 UTC, and the EIPs that we could not discuss in the previous meeting would be continued to be discussed.
The one point of feedback on the breakouts was maybe this was just me and I misread something. I went into the breakout session thinking it was just about 2718. It wasn't until I got there that I realized that it was actually about several things. I don't know if I just misread something or if there's a better way to convey that.
That just emerged into happening because we realized before we talk about what would happen with the transaction envelopes, understanding what was in YOLO was like important to understanding if we should do the one. So that just sort of happened on the call. So
Okay.
And wasn't like documented as something.
Right.
Okay. In that case, yeah, I'm totally fine with it. I do think the breakout rooms or breakout sessions for specific topics are better than generalized ones, because I think you're more likely to get people to show up if you're talking about one thing, whereas if you say we're going to talk about these 10 things, then it's hard to get people to dedicate time.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Right. And in the next meeting, along with 2718, we would be discussing about 2935 for the consideration in YOLO, but I'm not sure if people add further in the agenda that is available in Ethereum/PM. And if we get time, that might be discussed as well. Moving on, the next item is EIP triaging permissions. As far as I remember, Light Client and Hudson were working on it. Do we have any update on that?
No. In fact, do we still want to do that, right? Light client? Or do we need to figure out what the triaging would even be for before I give the permission set?
I think we still want to do it. I don't think there's anything to figure out. I think it's pretty straightforward. Said a GitHub username, and then they have the ability to use the tags that Alex has come up with on the repo.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just invite you and give you that permission set.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll see how it works out.
I have a question here related to, not related to the permission, but related to some recent bot changes. I see that the bot is now able to figure out what are stale, what are the processes. I'm going to share a link in the chat. And with that, we could see all the EIPs that are stale. Is anybody here that may be able to explain more about it, this new process on this new bot?
Sure. It's just a simple GitHub action that if a PR hasn't been commented on for 60 days or more, then it will get the stale tag, and the bot will comment on it saying, hey, this is automatically if you don't do anything. And then I think as soon as anyone comments on that PR, then the stale tag is removed and the timer starts over. If a PR has a stale tag for more than a week, then it will be closed automatically by the bot. So it's just a mechanism to deal with people who create PRs and then get feedback and then never respond to it. It'll automatically handle those for us.
That's great. And I see that it is not only for a stale, it also works for many other things. Like I see it also marks as processes. If any EIP is for process, any is for code and something.
I think those are being done by Alex manually. Someone might correct me if I'm wrong there.
Oh,
Yeah, those are done by hand.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got confused. I thought that bot is also taking care of this.
I cannot wait for the day when a bot can automatically do all that stuff.
That'll be a some, I don't know what it's called. Like the computers have taken over moment.
Singularity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anything more on this topic? Okay, moving on. The next item on the agenda is onboarding EIP editor survey to set expectation of an EIP editor. I think Edson.
Let me pull that up real quick. We only got 3 responses from EIP editors. I can go over generally what they're saying. So the time commitment for new EIP editors per week is about 5 hours per week to 0 hours per week, in that range. The tasks they're expected to do: make sure the EIPs are formatted, they're technically complete, working with authors to get new EIPs into the repo, looking at grammar, structure, the meaning, if it's related to Ethereum, and looking at the auto merger bot in cases it doesn't handle it. Good requirements for someone to become an EIP editor is to already be helping. So anyone could review EIPs. Editors are only needed to merge. Someone that understands the difference between a standard and a good idea. someone that understands the content that should go into a standard, and someone who's a good communicator and understands Ethereum at least into an intermediate level, and can handle contentious discourse and understands GitHub.
Great. So by this, just one point I want to mention it again, like by the task that has been suggested by the EIP editors, they want to focus it on if it is Ethereum related. I don't know if it brings back to our conversation that we had sometimes back on like what would be the EIP repository should be for. Maybe, I'm not sure, maybe we could have it a separate agenda item in one of the future meetings and then would like to discuss.
It would be nice to settle that. It's been an ongoing point of discussion, not just between like my client and I for the one we're currently having, but also like the other day, someone put in something to the EIP's repo, which was a specification for a new cryptographic primitive, which like is very general. That's like something you would submit as an RFC to some other standardized body. But they chose the Ethereum repo. Is Ethereum the EIP's repo the right place for that? Like, yes, Ethereum may use that cryptographic primitive at some point, but there are definitely better places, in my opinion, to get feedback on like cryptography stuff than the EIP's repo. So I think answering what is the scope of the EIP's repo cover? Does it cover just Ethereum and stuff that's going into Ethereum and stuff that's specific to Ethereum, or does it cover a more broad scope, including stuff that goes into that may or may not go into Ethereum, but is kind of related to the EVM and things that run the EVM? And does it include like cryptography, like which is tangentially related to Ethereum? So just answering that would be nice at some point. It's not a super pressing matter though either.
All right.
I have a quick update about the triage permission that we were just talking about. It turns out we have a legacy GitHub organization at the Ethereum organization in GitHub, and we would need to upgrade it, which would incur cost in order to get the triage permission. I don't know. There's some like pros and cons to doing that, so I'm gonna have to go over with the Ethereum Foundation DevOps team. But for right now, we can't do the triage permission. But I can talk to them. We're having a meeting tomorrow about it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll see what the outcome of that is. That's surprising that there's a cost because usually the open source stuff on GitHub is free.
Oh no. It's not that it's a paid feature. It's that there was when Microsoft got GitHub, they had this thing. So instead of it just being GitHub paid accounts per repository, it's now paid per user, and there's different names like enterprise and team and stuff. But the old one is just like GitHub Business or GitHub Paid or something like that, and that's the one we're on. The new stuff has new features, whether it's free or paid. So because this is a paid account in general, even though there's aspects that are free and a lot of the repos are free and open, not all the features can be in there until the whole organization is migrated over to the new type of account.
Very sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's all I had for that one.
Okay. So the next item here is clarification of how a precompile address is decided. I think this is something James was looking into.
For which part?
Item number 6, there is a link in the agenda.
I'll go back.
We decided this a few meetings ago, I think, and we just said this doesn't need to be on the EIPIP agendas anymore because it's just not applicable, I guess, to what's on an EIP.
Oh, okay.
I think. I could be wrong though. We'll see if James wants to keep it.
No, there was something I wrote at some point that might make it in somewhere, but we don't need to keep talking about it.
Right.
It was very far down on the list of a very long list that we're finally getting to.
Okay, maybe in past few meetings we could not answer that, or I just somehow missed that.
Yeah, I think it was just because James wasn't here to answer, and it was his comment in the thread. That was probably it.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, that's all on the agenda today. Do people have anything else to talk about? In fact, I may have something. I somehow came across a list, not a list, a document. I think it is originally made by Alex Exik. That talks about some of the problems with EIP. I'm not sure if people would want to have this in some of the future meetings because I find these are related to the process and that the group is working towards.
We should see which ones are still applicable. Some of these looks like it's still been decided on.
The last item in there, there are some more issues raised by community. It actually marks all the EIPs that are related to the process of EIP1. So that list might be something that we could use to.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, we can put a few at a time as long as we don't overrun the agenda. That'd be nice.
Right. So
I had any thoughts on if we're ready to start migrating EIP1 to having the new statuses we discussed previously?
I think we are ready for that.
I support it. I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think a PR would be required. I'm not sure, James, you would be taking care of that?
I don't know. It's a PR to EIP1. I don't know what's the best way to start it. I just know let's do it.
I think the one thing that might still be up in the air is Alex proposed changing withdrawn to abandoned and then having a reason field that's separate. Since it turns out there's a bunch of reasons why an EIP may end up no longer being worked on.
Yeah, so I read through his comment, and we have discussed this previously in March quite a bit, but we also had this discussion on EIP calls over a couple sessions of calls, and I feel like we decided on having those both, having the withdrawn and the abandoned, and we went through a lot of the reasons why and debated them back and forth a lot. So I don't know if it's like going back and doing that all over again is worth it at this point.
I definitely don't think it should hold anything up. Like whatever gets us to the new statuses quicker, I'm thumbs up on.
Yeah, like we even had Axic on a call on one of these multiple times and discussed it among a lots of us, and the decision was to keep both of them.
Okay.
I'm fine. I'm fine restarting the conversation and saying let's reevaluate, but I would not want it to stop the migration of the statuses. Start. Like we should start doing that now. And if someone wants to change a status, then of course they can propose that, and we should talk about it. But I don't want to hold anything up.
So how about about the implementation of a statuses? Like we should take it as one of the decision item here, and we already have proposed in the all core dev meeting. We did not see any, over my dead body kind of opposition or not so welcoming comment on that. So let's start working on it. Let's keep it as a part of decision item for now. And as we go on populating the new network repository, we'll make a pull request to EIP1, adding those statuses.
I mean, why wouldn't we just make a pull request now that adds the statuses and then work on migrating the EIP repo?
Yeah, we can do that too, but I would be happy if we can also add the network repository there in this pull request. I mean, just the link.
the EIP, and Micah, that it's that one, but without superseded. Superseded was retracted.
Excellent.
I'm still not totally understanding your suggestion, Pooja.
No, I'm proposing that as we discussed a few meetings back, like when we are adding something to the EIP1, we try to make it with new statuses. EIP statuses should be there. That's number one. And number two, we wanted to add about the network upgrade repository. Now that we have repository and it has actually, I mean, people have actually started populating it. So my suggestion was, let's have both of them getting into one pull request.
I would just do the EIP statuses, and then I actually like Micah's feedback of should it be in a README or should it be an EIP1. I think is good to consider, and I wouldn't want to get the conversation muddled between the two of them by having them both in the same PR.
Okay, I got your point. Yeah, great.
I would not reject either one of those PRs, README or EIP1.
And well, I forgot what I was going to say. Hopefully it comes back.
Okay.
That's fine.
Is there any, just so we don't get this lost, is there any volunteers for doing either of those things, either of those PRs?
Like we have the list of statuses, and that is already documented in James's document. So if he would like to do that, otherwise I can take a stab on that and add it to add a pull request to EIP1.
I can do that, and then let's add this as an item, but for you and I, Pooja, to go over in our call that we do.
Sure, we'll take it on our call.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, the last item here is, and not the item, it's actually the review thing about the previous meeting. So I am going by the decisions made in the last meeting. The first one is bring up EIP repository scope and triaging permission in the next meeting. We discussed it today. Number two, discuss EIP repository scope and triaging permission for if the hard fork coordinator is available. I think it's repeated. So it's both of the same thing. And we did discuss it today. Number three, wait 2 weeks to discuss onboarding EIP editor survey after receiving survey results. Thank you, Edson, for sharing that with us. We did discuss that as well. The last one is wait for James to discuss clarification for how a pre-compile address is decided. If I understand it correct, that is not something under the EIP group scope. So we are dropping it for future meeting.
Yep.
So yeah, that's.
I'm assuming that survey, the purpose of the survey was to work on onboarding more EIP editors. If so, what are our next steps for that?
Right. The initial idea was to collect the feedback from the editors, and based on that, we are going to define the scope, timeline, the number of hours required, and maybe try to come up with a document which can be referred as a base document whenever we want to onboard any more new editors. So I'm not sure. Just checking with you first, Edson, because you have the feedbacks. Is it something that you would like to take on?
Doing the onboarding?
The document on onboarding process, like defining the scope, the duties, in what condition an editor can be onboarded, and what if they want to, or the group decided that they have to be removed from the position, something like that. Would you like to come up with a document?
Yeah, I can create a document.
Sounds good, thank you. So I think we can take it for the next meeting, or maybe in a meeting 1 or 2 meeting from today, we can discuss further on the scope and this document. That would help on the process of onboarding EIP editors. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and see you in 2 weeks. The next call is in on September 23rd at 1500 UTC. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pooja.
Yep, bye.
Thanks all.